was out there in the night sky, stared up at the stars in the hopes of seeing something out of the ordinary? Have you heard unexplainable noises coming from a vacant room, or watched a shadow cross the wall in front of you? Have you asked yourself if there is life after this one, or if you had life before? What about strange creatures that are mythical and elusive? Have you experienced deja vu or felt a prompting to leave because you felt you were in danger? If you have, you were on the fringe.
All right, welcome to another episode of On the Fringe. I'm Mark.
I'm Pam.
And I'm Jess, or Moth Jess.
Moth Jess.
Moth Jess.
For those of you who aren't familiar, Jess has got the thing going for Mothman. She even has a plushie.
I do. Check
See?
He's so cute.
I know. He's my little buddy.
It's her best friend.
He is.
Hey, Enzo.
Mothman loves me, and he loves you too.
Yay. Well, you know, Mothman has been seen as a harbinger for bad things. But I he's seen a lot of places where nothing really super bad has happened. And I believe one time, is in Europe someplace, he scared off a whole mining crew before their shift, and then the mine collapsed later that day. So,
interesting.
Maybe he's just trying to help.
Yeah.
Maybe.
He's misunderstood.
He is misunderstood. Mothman has been making headlines off and on since 1966.
Yes.
So he's been around a little while. I don't know if we have any pre-1966 sightings, but he was first seen in the Point Pleasant area by upwards of 100 people between 66 and 67. And then the bridge collapsed, and he's been seen all kinds of places. I've actually got a map of the United States places where he has been seen.
Cool.
So I can show that later or now if you guys want to watch it. Look at it.
Sure.
Go for it.
All
Throw it
right.
up there.
So I am technologically not too bright. Sorry. So you see him over here, West Virginia, and then up in Indiana, Michigan, all kinds of ones in the Chicago area. So all kinds of Mothman sightings over there. And then if you zoom out, there's even a few in Europe and Japan. So he gets around. He's international. But most of them seem to be in the eastern United States, and it looks like most of the sightings these days are up in the Chicago and the Michigan area.
Yeah. There have been a few sightings in Kansas City.
That's true. I have read about those.
Mm-hmm. And there was a few. There was a few down in Texas a year or two ago too.
Yeah, I have seen reports as recently as just this last year of sightings, including one near Point Pleasant in a cemetery. So it is an ongoing phenomenon.
Interesting one.
It really is. I'm sorry. My allergies are about to get me. So if I cough and hack on camera, I do apologize.
So let's back it up a little bit and let's tell like the basic story of Mothman so everybody kind of knows how it began. Now, we have knowledge of sightings of a Mothman type creature long before the Silver Bridge incident and everything that surrounds that. But we're going to start on that stuff because that's the one everybody knows. If you've watched the Mothman Prophecies or read John Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies, or This Silver Bridge by Gray Barker, all on that same topic. Books are very different, by the way, if you've never read the books. I would say to read Gray Barker's first because it really focuses on the bridge and it's more written like a novel, as if you're reading like it as a story. And then hit John Keel's book because that's where the wackiness begins, and he's a lot more detailed in the facts, and also his story runs in between it because he actually got involved with it. He walked in there and was a part of it, and actually had some experiences of his own. And of course, if any of you know John Keel at all, it goes in 30 different directions of craziness. So Point Pleasant, West Virginia, we're talking about the mid to late 60s. All of this is gearing up. The Silver Bridge has not collapsed yet, but we're gonna hit towards the end of fall coming into Christmas time, because that's when all of this really hits big. They had a few little sightings here and there leading up to this time, and they were just little teeny tiny one-offs. Like one gentleman was out fishing and he could have swore he saw a gigantic bird, but it was only for a minute. And then, just some little snippets here and there. So it's like gearing up, but it really hit big with two couples that had been out. There's an area called the TNT area just outside of Point Pleasant. It's a little rural area. It's actually an old World War II ammunitions plant that had long since been walked away from. And it's full of all these little, I shouldn't say little, they're fairly big, concrete bunkers, but they look like igloos. So these little domes kind of sitting out here. And I will say, so this particular area didn't have any history to it leading up to this point of any kind of hauntings or cryptids or Bigfoots or UFO activity. It was literally just a place where the teens would go to drive around, drag race their cars, and make out. There was a little makeout area. The cops knew it for the makeout area. They have to go out, every weekend and shine their flashlights in kids' cars and break it up.
Threaten to beat up the boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's absolutely no history of any kind of cryptid or haunting phenomenon happening in this area leading up to this. It literally was just kind of like, bam, here we go. So it started out November 15th with two couples that were out driving around in their 57 Chevy, just kind of cruising those back roads. And they spotted something, they called it super slender and muscular, shaped kind of like a man, but around 7 foot tall, had wings folded down in on itself, and had red, shining, hypnotic eyes. And this thing actually ended up rising up above their car and chased them all the way back into Point Pleasant. And the crazy thing is that it apparently kept up with them. They claim to have actually gotten up to 100 miles per hour, and it kept up quite easily. So imagine how fast that was flying. Another oddity to the Mothman is that people never saw it really flap its wings. It would spread its wings out, and then it would just go faster and faster and faster. The wings never flapped. So
It wasn't even a glide. It was more like a propulsion.
Yeah, it's very, very strange. Yes, there's other ones we'll mention later where it worked almost like a helicopter. It would like raise straight up. It would put its wings out and then it would raise straight up without it flapping. And then it would like do circles around vehicles without ever moving its wings. Very, very strange stuff.
Well, that almost makes you wonder if it wasn't some sort of experiment. I know that there's rumors of that.
Like an experimental flight suit or something.
Right.
Something.
There's a lot of conspiracy theories along those lines. So.
Yeah. So beyond those, it also had this weird screeching sound to it that apparently was very cacophonous. It was extraordinarily loud. Chasing these very young couples. I will say they were like 18, 19, so very, very young, newly married couples. Steve and Mary Mellette and Roger and Linda Scarsberry were their names. Another oddity to the situation is that on their way out before they spotted the Mothman, they had driven past a very dead dog in the road, which they were kind of sad about. Somebody's pet had probably gotten hit by a car. And they noted that on their way out, where they should have had to drive around that dead dog, the dog was gone. And this is going to be important later. This is a Mothman specialty. So they make it clear back into town. Mothman left them once they hit Point Pleasant city limits. They headed straight for the sheriff's office to report this, which they did. And luckily for them, the deputy on duty absolutely believed them. And he said later it was because this set of particular kids had never ever been in trouble, and they came from very good families, so there was absolutely no reason for them to make this up whatsoever. And he actually decided to follow them back out because he wanted to get down to the bottom of it. If something was chasing cars or something, he needed to know. And the first thing they did was they went out and they looked for that dog, and they never did find the body of the dog. And then he decided to park his car and take a look around. They didn't see anything, and he decided to radio back into the station. And when he flipped the radio on, they said what came through on the other side was this horribly loud noise, and it sounded like someone had turned a radio station on or a recording or a record and was playing it in fast forward. So it was this garbled message that was just spinning super, super fast, and it was getting louder and louder and louder. And he turned his radio off and on several times to get it to stop, and it was just worse every time he turned it on. So now we have the beginning of this strange, garbly, electronic-y sounding messages that start coming through later, and we'll discuss those too. It's all a very strange mess, right? So where are we? So that's the beginning of their story. Their story's going to pick up again later on. So the next morning, the sheriff's office called a press conference, and tons of reporters came in to interview the two couples and the sheriff and the deputy. And this is where Mothman got its name, because it hit the AP super hard and it spread like wildfire. And they still don't know exactly sure which one did it, but some copy editor at one of those newspapers ended up giving it the name the Mothman, and that's what stuck. Because I think before that it was called the Bird or the Flying Monster, whatever. Actually, it had about 100 names, because I'm going to start going through some of these stories, and just to give you some reference, they all call it something different. So I think it kind of lends credence to those not being sightings that were made up just so they could be a part of the phenomenon, but they were true sightings because they were trying to explain them in their own way, what they saw. So every sighting is going to be called something just a little bit different, which I think is super interesting.
It is, because they're not cookie cutter responses. Everyone, it's like when you take...
It's organic.
Camps. Yeah, it's organic, because, if you take the Bigfoot camp, the UFO camp, and the ghost hunters camps, they may see the same thing, but they're going to describe it in 3 entirely different ways using their own personal references or,
Mhm.
to pull from. And that's what makes these so interesting, these sightings, is because they are, like Mark said, they're organic. They're not just saying what everybody else said.
I saw Mothman.
Mhm.
He's like, I
Yeah.
saw this crazy flying thing. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, kind of looked like a bird, but it had red eyes. And yeah,
Yeah. That's what's interesting. Like the big particulars are still present in every story. The red eyes, the wings, the color, the shape of it, and its weird way that it moves or it flies. It's all in there. But they're all called something just a little bit different. How those each of these individuals are really trying to explain to people from their perspective what it was they saw.
Someone said they thought it looked like a really big owl.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, if you think of the shape of the Mothman that we know today, if you just saw it in silhouette real quick, you would think, okay, maybe it's a owl, or maybe it is a moth, or some kind of a weird bird, or
Oh yeah.
unless you see the sculpture that's in Point Pleasant
with the shiny butt.
with the shiny butt that everybody rubs for good luck. Yes.
Yeah, if you ever get a chance to go to Point Pleasant, do it. They have a huge museum there. I haven't yet gotten the chance to go, but it's on my to-do list. And they have a huge Mothman statue outside, and apparently it is highly popular and good luck to rub the Mothman's tush. And it's all rubbed shiny. It's pretty cute.
That's funny.
Well,
Anywho, we're getting off
when
topic
it
here.
comes time to go to make the road trip, Pam and I volunteer to go with.
Absolutely.
Yay!
100%.
We'll make it a road trip, and
Hopefully
we'll
there's
visit-
no big bridges. But
we'll
other
visit-
than that, we're good.
Oh no, we've got to do the bridges. Here is a picture of the Mothman statue.
Yes.
I don't know if you can see the shiny spot on his butt on this one, but you can see it
It's
on
hilarious.
my computer. So
All right. So moving on, I just want to let you know. So the research that I have out right now is solely on Mothman stuff. I'm going to let you know that in between all of this, there was other increments of high strangeness happening. Along with almost all of these Mothman sightings, there was a previous UFO sighting right before it. I'm just going to let you know that. Also, in between all of these, and I'm not going to touch on it because it's too much to do on this one show, we're just going to do Mothman, there were Men in Black sightings. They were showing up to these people's houses a day or days after their sightings with Mothman and doing all their fun, peculiar stuff. Along with all this weird electronical interference, phone interference, and stuff like that happening to all of these people.
weird phone calls.
Weird phone calls. Also happening to these people, which I'm not going to discuss in great detail here because the show will go 4 hours long, is the fact that each one of these people, even if they didn't have a UFO sighting to go along with their Mothman sighting, they still were having symptoms as if they had been part of a one-on-one UFO sighting. So, bleary red, splotchy faces, horrible rashes, eye issues, lung issues. Some of them had stuff so bad they couldn't see for a couple of days. They were just so swollen and messed up.
Like radiation.
Radiation poisoning and things like that. Stuff that you see with those like one-on-one super close contacts with aliens or UFOs. So this is all going down with Mothman. So I'm just putting that out there so you can kind of capture in your head how big this phenomenon was at the time. So the next night after the two couples had their run-in with Mothman in their Chevy, a Mr. and Mrs. Raymond Wamsley and Mrs. Marcella Bennett and her baby daughter Tina were in a car going through the TNT area, and they watched this crazy red light move over the whole TNT area with them. It was kind of floating above the tree line, and they watched it, and it finally zigzagged and zoomed off. They were headed to a friend's house just outside the TNT area. They didn't end up staying at the house. They all piled out of the car and knocked on the door and found out that the couple wasn't home, but their children were. So they spoke to their children briefly and turned around to leave. And when they did, the Mothman was standing behind their vehicle. And now here we've got another weird phenomenon going on. Apparently, the red eyes were so hypnotizing that the lady who had the baby with her froze up. She said she literally could not move. It was like she was petrified. And it caused her to drop her baby. Baby was fine, just really ticked off. Had gotten dropped in the dirt. And it actually took Mr. Wamsley coming and scooping the baby up and jerking her out of her weird fervor that she was underneath and getting them back into the house. And here's where it gets even scarier. They bolted the door closed, and the Mothman actually came up onto the porch and stuck his face in the window and just stared them down while they were calling the police. Police came fast, but they didn't get there fast enough. Mothman had skedaddled off. So now we have a second huge sighting that was reported to the press. And we've got this weird hypno effect happening with the eyes, which you're going to hear more about. That's going to become a large factor in all of these. Meanwhile, if any of y'all are Indrid Cold fans, because this is totally Indrid Cold territory, the night that happened was Woody Derenberger's third contact with Indrid Cold. So all of this is happening all at the same time. Just a heads up if you're keeping kind of track of how all this insanity is going. So November 17th, the next day after that, in the morning at 4:45 a.m., a lady named Mary Grouse, who actually lived across the road from the TNT area, woke up in the middle of the night, and above the treetops in the field above the TNT area, she watched this weird pre-lit, like inside lit disc float above the tree line, and it was turning red and green and red and green, and it was doing weird zigzag patterns and then shot off. So I'm letting you know that because later that afternoon, in that same exact spot, a 17-year-old boy was driving through there and reported seeing a huge bird thing, and it dove at his car and chased him for a mile on Route 7 right near Mary's home. So now we're getting this weird coincidental thing where a UFO happens and then you see Mothman. And he called it the huge bird thing. So, next day, November 18th, two firemen, Paul Yoder and Benjamin Enochs, encountered a giant bird with red eyes at the TNT area. They were out there looking for a good hunting spot where they spotted this thing. November 20th, 5 teenagers driving along nearby Campbell's Creek by the TNT area reported seeing a man-like bird creature standing beside the rock quarry. When spotted, it turned and it walked into the woods. So this time it didn't even try to fly. It just kind of sauntered itself back off into the woods. The same day, an elderly businessman saw a 7-foot-tall gray apparition with flaming red eyes in his front yard. He watched it for about an hour until it finally flew off. So now we're starting to get these repetitive, I'm going to show up here and there and pop up. I will say, whatever it was, I think it was sentient in some type of way, because all around the TNT area, people started showing up in droves trying to spot it. And every time they would gather someplace to watch for Mothman, it would pop up where they were not. So it was as if it knew where they were headed to next. They were also gathering at Woody Derenberger's trying to watch for Indrid Cold. Yeah. So it was taking advantage of the crowds not being at certain places, and that's where it would pop up at. Very strange.
I find it interesting that the phenomenon with the sightings of Mothman and the UFOs is very similar to what we discussed in the Owls episode.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Yeah, and this thing was called the Owlman at certain points.
You've got a great point, because, there's the mesmerization with the eyes in a lot of, and the height, the size of the thing, where they would pull up in the road and there it would be, just looking at
the 6-foot tall owl.
Yeah. So maybe it was an alien, but he couldn't quite cloak himself correctly, and it ended up looking like the Mothman instead of...
Maybe he didn't know what an owl really looked like, so when he was thinking owl, 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 he was... Or maybe he pronounced it wrong and it came out Mothman. I don't know. Birdman, Birdman, Birdman.
Maybe. Birdman, Birdman,
Harvey Birdman? Attorney law. Oh. Sorry. Flashback.
Yeah. Okay, November 24th. 2 adults and 2 children driving past the TNT area reported seeing a giant flying creature with huge buggy red eyes. So there's that one. November 25th at 7:15 a.m., a shoe salesman named Thomas Urey was driving Route 62 just north of the TNT area. He reported seeing a tall, gray, man-like figure standing in a field. And this one's very interesting. So we're going to really start seeing the Mothman's like propulsion and how it moves. So he said it suddenly spread a pair of wings and took off straight up like a helicopter. It veered over his convertible, and that's scary as heck. Could you imagine not having the protection of your car roof? You're just open. Scary stuff.
For sure.
It began flying in circles overhead. He stepped on the gas, but the creature continued doing circles, even though he had sped up to 75 miles per hour. So this car is speeding along at 75 miles per hour, and the Mothman is still doing its lazy circles.
Flying circles around him.
Around him. I can't even imagine the physics to get that one done.
It's wild.
Yeah. He reported to the Point Pleasant Sheriff's Office. He drove straight to the Sheriff's Office, just like the first couples did. And while he was there, he gave his report, and he said while it was flying over his car, the wingspan was so great, he estimated that it was about 10 feet, the wingspan. So it kind of gives you an idea. If it was around 7 foot tall and it had a wingspan of 10 feet,
it's pretty
scary
big
stuff. Yeah. November 26th in the evening, Ruth Foster saw the creature out of her front lawn. She said it was tall with big red eyes that popped out of its face. She said it had a funny looking little face, but no beak. It is noted that Ruth Foster is the first one to have claimed to have actually seen what its face looked like. All the previous ones, when they asked, what was its face shape or, its mouth, no one could ever say because they were just so hypnotized by those 2 red eyes.
Yep.
Yeah, she's the first one, and she said that she actually stood there for quite a long time, really looking at this thing. So apparently its hypnotic eyes didn't have any kind of effect on her for some reason. It'd be interesting to find out more about that, to find out why, if she had something particular going on, or I don't know. I just think that one's interesting.
Well, there is a certain percentage of any population that is immune to certain diseases, certain effects, medications, so she might have just been that lucky person who was immune to hypnotization. And some people can't be hypnotized.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, excuse me.
Right.
Okay, no, moving on. November 27th. We're moving on up through here, getting into December now. In the morning of November 27th, a lady named Connie Carpenter was chased by a gray-winged phantom just on the side of the golf course in the rural area there. So, gray-winged phantom. how she explained it. That evening, Sheila Kane, who was 13 at the time, and her younger sister were out walking along near the TNT area. Why their parents were letting them do this, I have no idea. But they were walking home, and they saw what they called an enormous something. That was what they called it, the enormous something. It was standing by the junkyard. It was gray and white with big red eyes, 7 feet tall. They screamed and ran home, and unfortunately, it flew up into the air and chased them part of that way home. Poor kids. Yeah, parents were calling the sheriff's office right away, and I'm sure they did not let their girls walk home past the TNT area again.
I am sure they did not want to walk past the
Probably
Yeah.
not. I would.
Yeah, I can't imagine why you would be letting your kids out walking around with all that going on. Even if you didn't think it was true, there had to have been tons of people going out there just to be looky-lures. Probably not a safe idea for kids to just be walking along that road. So, now we're going to get into December. December 4th, 5 men witnessed a large winged creature flying above the Ohio River just behind the airport. It was established later on that it was flying at about 300 feet up in the air and going about 70 miles per hour, because there was planes taking on and off, and a few of those gentlemen were actually pilots, so they were fairly good at estimating how fast that thing was going. They also made mention that it was strangely odd that whatever this thing was didn't flap its wings. So it was going 70 miles per hour following an airplane. Could you imagine the drag coming off the back of that airplane, and it still didn't have to flap its wings? So that's insanity. So now I'm going to get up into December 7th. Now, mind you, I'm skipping a lot of sightings because they were just little one-offs, like I saw this weird bird thing. December 7th is when John Keel's going to start getting involved. He'd gotten in there the day before to interview the sheriff and the 2 first couples that had witnessed that I was talking about out in their Chevy. And he managed to convince them to go back out to the TNT area with him and kind of show him around and kind of go over how it happened. And they did, although one of the ladies was pretty worse for wear at the time. She had suffered the worst of it. Her eyes were still very swollen, and she still had a lot of the rash, and she was still a little bit swollen, but she willingly went out to show him. And unfortunately, while they were out there showing him the bunkers and the igloos and things like that, they claimed to have spotted him again. All 4 of them said they were seeing glowing red eyes. John Keel himself didn't see the eyes, but he did later on spot the shadow of something that looked extraordinarily tall and dark kind of slip off into the wooded area behind the TNT plant there. And something really crazy happened. When they all spotted the shadow, one of them noticed that Mary Millette's ear was bleeding heavily from the inside, and she actually had to be taken off to the doctor. So now we're starting to get like really big physical stuff going on with it, and that was reported later on. People suffered from blood coming out of their eyes and their ears, and yet again, that can be another situation of radiation poisoning.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, all of that. So I'm going to skip a little bit because there's just more and more and more and more sightings.
Yeah, there was
None of them,
over 100.
There was lots. Yeah. And mind you, I will say this, and I'm a little on it. At this time, there was Mothman sightings all the way from Kentucky, all the way through Virginia, Michigan. There had been some sightings in New York, and I think all the way over into California too, all at the same time. But I want you to take that with a grain of salt, because I mean, they could have been legit sightings, but they also could have been people who just wanted to be a part of the crazy. So it's really hard to pick and choose on those. So I just take them with a grain of salt. So we're coming up here. to the Silver Bridge collapse, which happened on December 15th. And like I said, if you've watched Mothman Prophecies, you know all about that. In the movie, they allude to Mothman being like a harbinger, like a bad omen that this Silver Bridge thing was going to happen. I don't particularly think that's the case. I rather think the Silver Bridge, while maybe it didn't even come down because of this, but a lot of people had weird dreams and nightmares that included Mothman and Indrid Cold in them that alluded to the bridge collapsing. I think the bridge was probably meant to collapse because there was a really bad girder that had a stress crack in it. It was gonna go down, regardless if this Mothman thing was going on. But I think with all the high strangeness and the weirdness that was going on in the area, I think it just became a symptom to have precognitive dreams. And because that was something big getting ready to happen, it was included. There were dreams about someone saw Christmas packages in the water in their dream. And that came true later when the bridge fell. It was right before Christmas time. People were out doing their Christmas shopping. 46 people actually died that night. I don't remember how many cars went off that bridge into that freezing cold water. There was actually 2 bodies that were never even recovered. They lost 2 they never found. Terrible thing. And it was a stress fracture in a eye bar. I think it's what it's called, an eye bar. It was an eye bar failure that took it down. John Keel actually makes mention of him. He had a lot of precognitive stuff going on, but it ended up pointing him in the wrong direction every time. It was like a fake out. It was, he would think, oh, this building's going to explode. And the building wouldn't explode, and he'd sound like an absolute idiot. But like that same day, something would happen elsewhere that was huge. It was like he was getting wrong information fed to him.
It was a bait and switch again, it seems like.
Basically. Yeah. So it starts to, the Mothman sightings start to edge off from there. And that's, I think, another reason why they assumed that the culmination must have been the bridge collapse. But little do they talk about is that the Mothman didn't stop. It just spread to other places. Little clusters of this and that, but they called it different things in different places too. So you kind of have to do like this mystery map where you kind of follow it. Where did he pop up next? What were they calling it?
Creatures.
Yeah, exactly. And I believe that they thought it was all Silverbridge stuff because of the Chief Cornstalk curse.
I would agree. Yes.
Yeah. Do you guys want to do you guys want to tell them about the Chief Cornstalk curse? Or do you know enough about it to talk about it?
I don't remember enough to talk about it.
That's my problem too. I know he was tied in with Mammoth Caves.
Yeah. So Chief Cornstalk was the chief of, holy cow, Cherokees, the Iroquois, and what I can't remember which other Indian group down there. Anywho, he was. So he was chief during the time that the English, the white people were moving into the area and forts were being set up, and he was very much against this. Constantly was fighting and battling against the people coming in and setting up these forts and stuff. And at one point, they finally tried to set up like a treaty with him. Let's live peacefully. We'll give you this. We'll split it and all this other stuff. And he went in to make this treaty, and it didn't go right. And basically, they annihilated most of the Indians. They did keep him kind of they kept him kind of tied up there for a little bit. And before they ended up killing him, he put a curse on the land, supposedly, basically saying nothing that the white man ever is going to build here will work. Your land is going to fail and it's cursed forever. And one day you're all going to get it. And so a lot of people assumed that maybe the Mothman figure was kind of this curse come to meat and bone. That it was like Chief Cornstalk coming back and sending this thing from hell out to unleash on the people of this area. So whether I believe that or not, I don't know. And one day we should do a story on Chief Cornstalk
Just
because he has
He's a very interesting figure, actually.
he has his own
stuff. Pops up
Yeah.
in a lot of our ancient American things.
Yes.
So many
Yeah.
things that are tied in with him and that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you talk Chief Cornstalk, then you start getting into the ancient annals of Kentucky, the supposed super tall white men with blonde hair and blue eyes that lived in the caves that the Indians were actually scared of because they were the ancient ancients. They were the ones that had been there first, like long ago. And apparently they came out of the caves and some of the Indian tribes married into them. And supposedly Chief Cornstalk is one of these descendants of them. And in a lot of the tribes, he wasn't called chief. He was called king. And his wife was the queen and his daughter was the princess, which absolutely makes no sense with Indian culture. That only happens at powwows when they want to, throw a crown on, one of the younger girls. We'll call her our princess. That's not really a part of Indian stuff. So, and they found his name in caves where they found out that these very old Indian tribes were doing their old gold mining. How often do you hear about Indians having, precious gold?
Yeah.
So,
Not North America, no.
no. Very wrapped up in the Hellier Project, too, if any of you at home know what that is, with Greg and Dana Newkirk. They found very odd Chief Cornstalk stuff that went along with Hellier things, and the cave and the Kentucky goblins, and crazy stuff. So, yeah, he's his own show.
Yeah. I mean, and
Absolutely.
it's insanity.
We need to write that down.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so that is the basis for the Mothman that you know from Graybarker and John Keel's book and the Mothman Prophecies, the movie. Read them all, watch the movie. It's one of my favorite movies. We were talking backstage about the movie. They, of course, can't touch on every little thing, but I think it does a very good job of following along with John Keel's book. And the oddities, they kind of allude to all the oddities in little short ways, so you kind of get the high strangeness that is really involved with all of this. But seriously, read John Keel's book, because you'll come out of it a changed person. You'll be like, wow, what was that about?
Yeah.
That's some
What did I
nuttiness.
just read?
Yeah. All sorts of stuff, like little things, like when he went out with the couples back out to the TNT area to have them show him exactly what happened. Another oddity that happened while they were out there, as they were leaving, they hit a spot in the road where John Keel said that everybody just kind of changed. It got very strange. It got very pressury feeling. And he said his heartbeat went a mile a minute and he felt just extraordinarily scared for some reason. He couldn't explain why. And they drove for just a little bit, and then suddenly they didn't feel it anymore. They felt okay. And he kind of wondered what that was all about, so he actually turned the car back around and drove back. And when they hit that spot again, it was right back again. And they ended up, he parked the car, and he got out, and he walked into that area they drove. And he felt it again, and he actually felt the line. He could walk across it and feel horribly scared all of a sudden, and then walk back out of it and feel perfectly fine. He actually called it the weird zone or something, or the zone of fear is what he called it. And it was only there for that one night. He came back the next day to test it again, and it didn't happen.
Gone.
So just super strange. And that's an Oz effect if I ever heard one. I wonder, because if Mothman was out there and they had the UFO activity going on, if he wasn't in some area of high strangeness that was kind of open. We've talked about that before when I had my UFO sighting and I was talking to you on the phone, Pam, and then all of a sudden I was just scared out of my mind. And for the first time as a paranormal investigator, I ran and locked my door and was closing all my windows and locking them.
Oh, I gotta go.
Zoom. Yep. Zoom. Yeah. That weird Oz effect or whatever that is.
We've likened it to, I know I use this every time we talk about it, is like police cars that have the rumble effect, like if they're behind you and you don't see them, they'll hit that rumble and it just goes through your soul, it just jars your teeth. It's just like, oh, all of a sudden out of the blue. It's kind of like that. It's like sending in a feeling of intense fear to make a person go away kind of thing.
Yeah. Like it's trying to, scare you out of its way, out of its path or something. I don't know.
Trying to make you uncomfortable to leave. And that effect can actually be reproduced with sonics. So I could see, I'm not sure about the sharp line, but, we use sonic deterrents to make people feel uncomfortable. So they'll stay away from embassy gates or what have you. So why not? Makes perfect sense. I mean, we can duplicate something very similar to that. That some creature might be able to do it psychically or technologically. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, we can do it now.
It does.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep. So I snagged up. I couldn't find my Gray Barker book, unfortunately, to show you guys. It's lost somewhere in the piles. But yeah, John Keel, Mothman Prophecies. Absolutely read it. Holy cow! And then read it one more time because you will not be able to process all of it. I've read this, I can't tell you how many times I've read it, and once in a while I still find a new connection. Like I'm like, oh, I wonder if that belongs with that, I still am making connections with it. The movie, I pulled that out so you guys can see it. Absolutely get it. It's one of my favorites, and I was telling them, Mark hasn't actually seen it. It's not like gory, scary or anything. It's very psychological, and it's just super interesting. All of the weirdness happening. I thought Richard Gere actually did a fantastic job. He's really he's really supposed to be kind of the John Keel character. John Keel wishes he was as good looking as Richard Gere, I think, but
I mean,
yeah.
They always make people look way better than they do in reality.
That's true. Yeah. That's a very good point.
Another really good one to get, and this is good to get even if you're not interested in Mothman. This one just has so much information. Linda S. Godfrey's American Monsters.
Yes.
Fantastic. And it does have an entire section on Mothman in there, and you kind of get some of her feelings on the situation too. Always good to have other point of views. And then, of course, we need to talk about, Mothman's movement. So it's not just a West Virginia thing. Like Mark was talking about earlier, huge explosion of Mothman sightings in the Chicago area, and still to this day. It started in 2017 is when it really took off, and it's still going pretty heavy.
Particularly around the airport.
Yes, the airport. I did look up some statistics, and apparently just in 2017 alone, there were over 40 reported sightings of the Mothman in Chicago. And those were the ones that were reported. you
Right.
all have watched the show long enough to remember, we call it the Brian Terrell effect. He always discusses, because he's Bigfoot and cryptids, for every 10 sightings, only one is ever reported.
Yep.
So whenever you hear a report, usually you can times it by 10. So if there were 40 sightings reported in Chicago just in 2017, then we're talking probably about 400 sightings.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of them. Look at that area.
And they're widespread. They're not, there's some that are clustered, but
Yeah, and then you get over here, and there's some in Michigan,
yeah.
just across the lake.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. One of the interesting ones I had read, it's been a number of years ago, but I thought it was so interesting. One of the Mothman sightings inside of Chicago that wasn't the airport. There was a lady who was walking to her apartment at night in a little residential area, and there was a park on one side of her and the buildings that she was walking on the sidewalk by. And she looked off towards the park because something odd caught her eye, and there was a park light, and in front of it was one of those kind of old-fashioned decorative light posts, with the big light sitting on top of it, and the light wasn't on. And it just caught her eye because, you're used to, in your usual spot, things that are lit up at night suddenly aren't lit up. You notice that. And she looked over and she realized that it wasn't that the light was out, is that it was blocked. And she started really looking and realized that there was this huge shadow on top of that light post where the light should be. And when she finally got focused in on it, this thing, which she thought was just this globular shadow, wings came out from it, and it stood up and stretched up, and she said it was about 7 feet tall, and she said it took off from the post straight up into the sky, and she watched it disappear, and it never flapped its wings either. But could you imagine that, just kind of coming out of the shadows and just taking off like that?
Adrian, that I do a Muck podcast with, Muck Paranormal, him and his wife Tina had a sighting, and it's been quite a few years ago. They didn't call it a Mothman, but they called it a winged creature, and it was in I'm going to say it was in Muskogee, Oklahoma. I could be wrong on the town, but it was in southeast Oklahoma where it happened. And so there's sightings like that they don't, they didn't necessarily contribute to Mothman.
They don't
very similar to Mothman.
Yeah.
It does seem to be quite a widespread phenomenon, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enzo said compared to the book, it wasn't weird enough.
Oh,
yeah.
The movie?
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, could you imagine how long that movie would be to try to pack in all of that stuff?
That's
16 hours later.
Yeah. And make it like reasonable enough for you to understand. Because one of the things I like about Keel's book is that he's not just focusing on the Mothman part of the story. He's literally trying to bring in all these different elements. And he tells you, I don't know if one has to do with the other, but the fact that it's all happening all at the same time, so close to the same area,
is suspicious.
There has to be something.
There's got to be
linking these together.
Yes.
Yeah, there absolutely has to be something going on. And I really think this is where John Keel got to the part where we always laugh and joke about don't keel yourself, don't John Keel yourself, because he went so overboard later on in his life. I think he just lived in high strangeness for the rest of his life.
I think it drove him mad.
I think it did too.
Yeah.
Because
there was
it's horrifying to think if he wasn't crazy, what was actually happening.
Yeah. If you are all interested in that, there was a very good book written about him. I'll have to go and see if I can't find it on my bookshelves to tell you who it's by. But it delves into Mothman and all of his other books that he wrote and his life of high strangeness afterwards. being contacted by supposed star people, and the constant phone calls with weird buzzings and ringings on the other side, and things happening like he one day got a phone call from a gentleman who he had been very good friends with and had not seen in years. And this guy called him up and was like, "Hey, come visit me. I'm living here at this place now. If you get a chance to, come by and we'll just sit down and have a good old sit down and chit chat." And he was so excited because he really liked this guy, and he showed up and they sat down and they stayed up until the early morning hours just talking about old times. And having coffee and cake and just having a great time. And he left there feeling great. And, I'll call you later and we'll get together and do this again. Absolutely. Tried to get a hold of him again later on. Couldn't get a hold of him. Couldn't find him. No whisper of him whatsoever. And he ended up a little bit later running on to this guy's wife. And he was like, "Oh, hey, how's your husband? I can't get a hold of him." And she just looked at him so funny, and she was like, "Honey, he died years ago. Years and years ago he died." She was like, "I've been a widow." So he literally got contacted by a friend who was dead, spent an entire night up talking about good old times with them. Come to find out he hadn't even been alive, so who the heck was he talking to?
Exactly. Who would have known enough about him to be able to hold this conversation for that many hours and know all the details?
Yeah.
Without raising suspicion from a researcher.
Yeah.
I think that was a timeline jump.
Who knows?
Maybe.
Also, he wrote a lot for magazines and, sci-fi publications and things like that. He would write in the stories he knew and stuff. And he was having issues with that. Somebody was getting those through the mail, stopping them from going where they were supposed to, and changing the wording in some of it sometimes, or taking stuff out and then sending it back along on the way, or it would get returned to him years later, having never been actually sent, and it would have new information added into it. Just, there's so much more than that. But if you're ever interested in just how weird high strangeness can get, read about John Keel.
It's like something was just messing with him, just trying to drive him nuts,
Yeah.
I think it worked.
I think it did too. But what was the reasoning behind it? Was it to discredit him? More than likely.
Yeah.
Who
Maybe.
knows for
He was
sure.
on to something, and I mean,
Yeah.
our government does it to people. If you come out and you see something that you shouldn't have, they will come out, "Oh, these people are crazy. They're conspiracy theorists."
That's exactly what he did and does to this
years
day.
later, it comes out, "Oh yeah, we really did that, and we drove this guy into killing himself or something."
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
I mean, it happens. We know that it happens for real because our government has admitted to it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the term gaslighting comes to mind.
Big time. And there's a movie out there. Actually, it's a documentary, and it's called Mirage Men. And it's so good, and it hits so close to home when it comes to the idea of being gaslit, to be made to think that you're absolutely insane and to drive people insane, because they absolutely have done that.
Yeah.
But it's a fascinating documentary. I would encourage anybody to watch it because it's really, really interesting.
So, I mean, and private citizens, people do it to each other all the time.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, it's not implausible to think that somebody intentionally sent him over the edge.
Mm-hmm. More than likely they did, but it's just sad to think that they took someone that was so interested in this stuff and just. I mean, I know they did it because obviously he was onto something, but what was that something? I think by the end of his life, it was so convoluted to what it could
He even
potentially
didn't
be.
know at that point.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it had
And that's the point. People do that to each other.
Oh, good. She found it. Yay.
Yeah. So this one is called John Keel, The Man, the Myths, and the Ongoing Mysteries by Brent Rains. Right there.
Nice.
Super interesting. This dude takes a really deep dive into John Keel's life, and all the strangeness, the high strangeness, and the mysteries that go along with it. And also does a great deal on his death. So, for those of you who don't know a lot about John Keel, while his lifetime was extraordinarily mysterious and weird, his death was also extraordinarily mysterious and weird. He died fairly suddenly, and was whisked away very quickly and buried. And then when the people who were supposed to receive his stuff showed up to his apartment to start, sorting through everything and getting it broken down, they realized that most of his files and most of his recordings, which he had dozens and dozens and dozens of, boxes and boxes full of reel-to-reel recordings and things like that, all of that was gone. Just vanished. The only thing left in
Warehouse 13, wherever it is.
Yeah, never found. They don't know where any of it went. And I don't believe he had much family left either. So I think it was friends that was coming in to clean it out and just gone. Yeah.
Weird.
Fantastic book though. So much stuff you don't even hear about in the books. So
nice.
Yeah.
The book's on sale now on Amazon. John A. Keel, The Man, the Myths, and the Ongoing Mysteries by Brent Rains for $16.13. Thanks, Enzo.
And speaking of Amazon, you can buy the Mothman Prophecies for $13 for a softback. Or if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free. I checked earlier.
It's an excellent, it truly is. I know Jess said it earlier and Marcus said it too. It's an excellent book, excellent read, one that if you have any interest in the subject at all, you will return to again and again, and hit different points in it. I know mine, you saw Jess's copy. It's got all the little tags in it everywhere. Mine is the same way.
Yeah. So, also interestingly, I haven't had this book out in a little while. And I just read one of the tags. Inside this is some of the Cheshire Cat stories that we talk about.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She recalled another strange incident. I was coming down my stairs into the living room. It was in the summer, and the light was bright as my house is on top of a mountain, and is designed to maximize the view in the light. I was 2/3 of the way from the bottom of the stairs when coming towards me was this very strange, nasty-looking animal. It was about the size of a large tomcat with a bushy tail and stripes about 3.5 inches wide of the oddest colors, a yellowish, greenish, alternating with a brownish purple. Yeah.
That seems disturbing.
You might construe the animal as some kind of a cat, except for the head and teeth. It had rounded small ears set too close together, and the head was narrow, with a rounded snout and many needle-like teeth. The mouth was open and not at all friendly looking. It came at me and as if it did not see me, and went between my legs and up the stairs. I turned to stare at it, and it reached the top of the stairs and vanished. It made a popping sound, and then it was gone. And we find this with these Cheshire stories that
yes, a lot.
They kind of walk through like a Cheshire cat would on a Disney movie, and then they disappear. They go pop. And it always happens right after a major UFO sighting. And this was after a major UFO sighting in Brazil. We've talked about this before. There's actually 2 or 3 other sightings of this strange Cheshire cat all around Brazil after the, I think it was in Rio de Janeiro, up on one of the mountains is where it was a UFO sighting, and it went into the side of the mountain. Like the mountain absorbed it. So,
right.
Yeah. Anywho, super fascinating book. Another one I would recommend if you're interested in John Keel. He wrote another one called Our Haunted Planet. And this one contains a lot of his theories on how things work, the paranormal and cryptids and high strangeness and missing time. A lot of that of his views are in here, and he has some extraordinary thoughts on the matter. I don't think they're all true. He would kind of go off in the weeds, I think, sometimes on particular topics.
Yeah.
But his thought process is so very interesting, and it'll kind of give you an idea on to kind of like the weird stuff that he was dealing with.
Yes.
$10 on Amazon.
Yeah. I think I might be wrong, but I think this is the one that alludes to the tin can that they picked up in Hellier.
Is it that one or is it the oh, it might be that one.
Yeah.
I can't think of the title of mine. It's back on my bookshelf. Hang on. We are back.
We're all rating our bookshelves.
We are.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, the Hellier series put on by Greg and Dana Newkirk. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's extraordinarily interesting. It's basically they go looking for goblins in Kentucky because they got sent some really weird cryptic emails, and they kind of go on the hunt, and it's actually their adventure of high strangeness. Weird things and synchronicities keep happening to them all the way, and it kind of leads them on this strange little journey. Super interesting. But in one of the scenes, they ended up going to these caves, and the night before they had done some Estes session stuff, and when they were doing this, Connor Randall, I believe, was the one that was having had the headphones on, was saying everything that was being heard, and he kept saying he was seeing this tin can. And he explained it very well, and he said he could picture it in his mind what he was seeing, and the next night they ended up at this cave system, and he found that exact tin can in there. And oddly enough, with the synchronicities happening and stuff, later on after they were back home, he said he was over at Greg and Dana's house, and they have a very large collection of paranormal style books. And he was just kind of poking through them because he was bored, and he found a John Keelan book in there that he had never seen before, and thought, oh, well, I'll crack this open. Maybe this will be interesting. And he just flipped to the middle of the book and started reading, and right there was John Keel's description of high strangeness being like finding a tin can, is how he explained it. And it just hit home with him. He was like, oh my God, I found the tin can, literally. So I think it's in Our Haunted Planet. I might be wrong. I have several of his books. I just grabbed this one because it had great stuff on kind of how he thinks. Yeah. We've completely left Mothman behind. Now we're on John Keel.
Well, I mean, you can't really discuss Mothman without talking about John Keel.
Yeah.
I don't think it's. Is it this one?
The Big Blackout? Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
For some reason, and I don't have it marked in here if it is, but that's not surprising.
Well, let me go grab my copy because I'll probably have it marked.
Okay, cool.
Oh, we
are out in the weeds, y'all.
I mean, and that's the beauty of this show is we do get out in the weeds, and kind of the whole idea of the show. And I'll just talk about this while she's getting her book. The whole idea of this show is to get you, the public, interested in what we're talking about. Do your own research. Read the books.
Read all the books.
Read all the books. I am trying to prove that Kindle Unlimited actually has a limit. So far, I failed, but it's not for lack of trying.
Or Everend. Everend's good, too. They have some of the really off-the-wall
I'm afraid of starting a new book provider, ebook provider, because I'm afraid I will have to quit all my work and
your day job.
I'll just become a hermit. More books. Have you seen the Book Goblin?
Yes.
Get on Facebook and look at the Book Goblin. I mean, we kind of I identify with Book Goblin.
Yeah, I can see that. That
makes books. I've not read any of that lady's books, but I love the Book Goblin. So
Too funny. I'm digging while you're talking. I'm digging through my online books too to see if I can find any of.
we have often talked about starting a paranormal library.
We have.
We have. I don't know if we do, it's probably going to be like one of those portable offices on wheels. But then we could take it from town to town.
Ooh, how fun would that be?
That would be kind of fun.
Hang out with us and
one of our pipe
research all day long. That would be so fun.
Yep. And Chris says, "No, I'll never see you or talk to again."
Chris, you could come hang out with us.
Well, I mean, that's what would happen if I got more than one book provider. It's bad. As soon as I get home and eat, I read most of the evening until it's time for bed. Of course, most of my evening is not very long. I generally go to bed at 7 o'clock because I get up at 3 a.m.
Yeah, that's rough, man.
So
I don't know.
Yeah. We got another book provider. So I'm going just for my family's sake, I will not get another book provider.
I'm telling you though, if you ever decide that you want one, go with Everend. It used to be just Scribd, and now it's called Everend, and it is the best. They have the best weird books. If you're looking for the weird ones that you can't find anywhere else, that's an excellent place to search for them at.
I have the Scribd app. Does it still work, or is it?
Scribd is mostly documents now.
Okay.
And then Everend, it's the same thing. If you have a Scribd, Scribd subscription, it includes Everend.
Okay.
I didn't find it. I don't know where my copy is.
Darn.
Dang it.
I don't know where my mind is, so I mean.
I'm like digging through my online books too to see if I can find it in there.
It's somewhere. I have piles of books everywhere. I get like, I have a habit of if I find a little topic, something new I want to look at, but I think I might have books relating to it, I'll compile those books into a pile with that notebook.
Yeah.
And then when I get to it, I kind of have it all there. And I'm sure it's probably in one of those piles around my house. It's...
Yeah,
I resemble that. I have piles.
Yeah.
I do that. I'll put them on bookshelf in certain, sections where I've been researching something specific. And then they end up all over the place by the end of it. I'm surprised I know where anything is at this point because I moved one of my bookshelves. And so I had to take everything off and put it back on, and I was in a hurry, so I didn't put it in the order it was in originally. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And as a librarian, that makes my teeth.
I'm getting ready to expand my bookshelf so I can get all my collection out of boxes, off the floor, off my end tables. I want to spend like $300 on freaking bookshelves.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
I'd rather spend $300 on books.
Oh, that's true.
Well, I already have. That's why.
Just think how great they'll look on the shelf, and you'll be able to find them all.
Yes, I need to read them all. I have a huge pile of books I haven't even read yet.
Same.
I have got a whole bunch of stuff for forbidden history and whatnot, and I haven't touched them. I just they're like that thick.
It happens.
That looks like
and
work.
What did Jess and I do? We went this weekend and we added to our piles of to-be reads.
Yeah. Speaking of bridges, I mean, poor Pam crossed the longest bridge in Kentucky.
literally the longest bridge in Kentucky. Yeah. And I'm if you know me, you know I am terrified of bridges and heights. And if you put the longest, very tall bridge together and me driving over it and poor Jess in the passenger seat trying to talk me through it.
While she cussed like a sailor, like a sailor,
Like a
Oh,
failure.
yeah, I did.
like a sailor. It was
I
terrible.
did.
My ears were
Oh.
burning.
They're probably still red.
Invented some words, did you?
She did.
She
I
did.
think I did. I couldn't even tell you. I was just like freaking out. Here I pulled up a couple of pictures to show you, Mark. Here's one of, well, this is the longest over the Ohio.
Oh, good Lord.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Are you seeing my terror now? There's what it
Yeah,
looked like
that's
going
the
onto
same.
it.
Didn't the Silver Bridge look a lot like that?
Uh-huh. Yes,
Oh,
sir,
good.
it does.
Well, let's just hit that with a barge and see what happens.
Right? I'm just like, no. And this one wasn't the scariest. The scariest of them. Let me switch screens. This one. Look at this monster. It wasn't as long, but it was way taller. Oh, am I not showing it? Oh, sorry. I'm sitting here thinking y'all can see it. Whoops. Try that again. There we go.
That looks pleasant.
No, not pleasant. Not a bit. See how it goes up and then it curves? So you
Yeah, well,
see
see how high those high water marks were on there?
Yeah.
I mean, that's no.
Okay, you want to hear the funniest part of all this? So we're going over this, and number one, obviously we're going to cross some bridges coming from Missouri into Kentucky, and you go through Illinois on the way. You're going to cross bridges, right? So I'm not thinking anything of it. I can handle a normal bridge. But we get onto these, and I don't see this one coming until we come around the curve, and there it is. And I'm like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, and Jess is like, what? Oh God, oh, that's scary. And so, we're going over this, and I'm white knuckling it the whole way. And we get over this one, we go around another curve, and then there's this other bridge that's even bigger and longer. And she's right. I was cussing a blue streak, just freaking out.
Enzo says that looks Point Pleasant.
Right? It does. But we get on the other side of it and we pull into Wycliffe, Kentucky. And you go around this curve and there's like these Indian mounds and stuff. And I was like, wait a minute, I've been here before. And Jess was like, really, you have? And I was like, this looks extremely familiar. I think I have. So when we were in our hotel that night, I pulled up where I had gone to, I think it was Kingsport, Tennessee, a few years ago for a funeral with a friend. And we had been there, but at the time, these bridges, there was a really bad flood, and these bridges, there was water up to the edges of the roads, coming up to them and coming off of them. So yeah, Ken, I would have made your ears burst into flames. I cussed a lot.
Oh my goodness.
Jess was great. She was a trooper. She talked me through it.
I did.
She did.
I was like, just calm down. Just breathe.
Well, you're
just
driving.
Yeah.
She did not. She was like, "Oh, you're doing great. Just deep breaths. You got this. We're doing great."
Yep.
So we don't really bring this up, but this is a paranormal subject. So when making a road trip for any kind of purpose, please pick someone to drive who is not afraid of bridges, narrow roads.
Yeah. See,
windy
I offered.
mountain
I was like, "Do you want me to drive?"
Oh,
And
yeah.
she was like, "Hell no! I'll be even worse off if I'm not the one driving." And I was like, "Okay."
I always love those mountain
Sorry, I
roads
offered.
where the white line is 6 inches from a 500-foot drop.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Those are
yeah.
that's scary, man. But the most of the way there, it wasn't bad at all. We were in Missouri in the hills, but we went right through. Well, I guess we kind of skirted the edge of Mark Twain National Forest, and there were some decent hills and stuff, but nothing scary. Not until we came around that curve and there was that bridge.
Pam's nemesis.
Oh,
or nemesis, because there was two.
You should have saw me. I was like, okay, we did it. We come around the curve. Son of a bitch, there's another one.
It was actually pretty funny. We had to turn. We had to go off the road to go to the next one. And she goes, oh my gosh, look at that one. Oh God, we're not turning there, are we? We're not turning there. And she looked down at the GPS and she goes, shit, we are.
I was like, we were like 20 miles from our destination. I'm like, we could turn around and go home. 7 hours away.
I kind of wish like somebody was recording the both of us, because it had to have been comical, because she was losing her shit and I had my phone up. I was like,
taking
pictures. And I was taking pictures. I was like, cool, look at this bridge. And she was just like, I don't like this. I don't like this. And I was all like, hee hee hee.
And I know at one point she's like, smile. So I'm sure there's one of me like.
She wouldn't look at the camera so I could take a picture of her, because I was like, congratulations, you made it. And she was just straight forward, just fuming. Like,
yeah, white knuckling it. Ken asked, was that the old bridges through Kentucky Lake and Dam? No, it was not. It's the bridges that, what was it called? The Cairo, Kentucky Bridge.
One went over the Mississippi and one went over the
Ohio. Mm-hmm. It's right by White Cliff, Kentucky. Yeah, rough. And it truly, the Cairo, I can't remember, it's Cairo something bridge. But, it's the Cairo, Mississippi River Bridge is what it is. And it is the longest bridge in Kentucky. And and there's like, it's really narrow and there's like Walmart trucks whizzing by us. And I'm just like, wah!
It's a fairly old looking bridge.
It is. And in January, they were talking about the plans moving forward to replace that bridge. So, But on that one, when you get up in the very middle of it, the second bridge, there's one point where you hit it and you go up and it almost feels like it bounces when you hit it. And I was just like, nope. In the corner and there it was. Oh.
Yep.
That's pretty much. I did good. I don't think I slowed down too much. I was like,
we had to on the first bridge because there were bumps. There was little platforms that went through it. So she was like, I don't like the bumps. I don't like the bumps. Oh, it's too funny.
It did not look like a pleasant place to cross.
No, it wasn't great, but we got through it just fine.
We had actually looked up to see if there was a way for us to go around it, so I didn't have to do that again. There's not. It was like, 3 hours the other day?
Yeah, it was going to be like an extra 3 hours just to go around it. So, yeah, that was a no-go. Did you want to talk about why we went to Kentucky real quick?
Absolutely. So, we have a friend. His name is Pat Fitzhugh, and he is out of Nashville, Tennessee, and he is the renowned Bell Witch expert. And he was giving a presentation on the Bell Witch in Paducah, Kentucky. And Jess actually ran across it first and she was like, oh, you want to go? And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? So that's what we did. We went to Kentucky to hang out with Pat and his daughter. And we had a great time. We got, I already had this one book, but I'll show it just to show. Here's his Bell Witch, the full account. And then this one I've tried to get the last 2 times I've been around him, and he's been sold out every time. So I grabbed one of these, Ghostly Cries from Dixie. So super excited. We got to hang out with him and his daughter Kelly, and we ended up going to dinner together and closed the restaurant down, actually.
Yeah, we did.
Nice.
He is a fascinating individual, and he's promised us that he's going to come on to one of the podcasts here, and we're going to interview and stuff, because he told some stories that I about flipped out on. I'm not going to tell them here because we're going to make him tell these stories when he comes on the podcast, whether he does this one or does Bordertown Strange, or maybe we can get him to do both at some point.
There was at least 3 times that both of our jaws hit the table.
We could do a combo show.
Oh yeah, crossover.
Come up with some special art, and just have a combo show.
That'd be fun.
Yeah,
yeah,
that could be fun. Yeah, he's truly interesting, and he does way more than the Bell Witch. In fact, he kind of needled at us a little bit. We were like, "You got to come on and talk about the Bell Witch," and he was, I know a whole lot of stuff about other things too. Like, I think he's probably getting a little tired of the Bell Witch, but
probably.
We'll certainly have him touch on Bell Witch stuff, but we promised him he could kind of come up with some of the stuff that he wanted to talk about.
Sure. Yeah.
I am totally in if you guys want to do that.
Absolutely. Ken said, "I'm okay on skinny roads, just not skinny bridges." Same, dude. Nope, not a fan. And we did. We had a great time. It was fun.
We did.
It was a whirlwind trip. We left our house at 6:00 in the morning on Saturday, and we got there at 1:51 p.m. just in time for his presentation to start at 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then we checked in our hotel, relaxed for about 30, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And then went to dinner and closed the restaurant down. And then we turned around and headed home the next day.
Yeah.
Worth it.
It was
every
fun.
second of it. Bridges and all. It was worth it.
Yeah.
Every time something would happen. Adventure.
I will say, so the 2 books that Pam showed, I went ahead and picked up a set for myself because I didn't have them. And then I picked up an extra set that he specially signed. And those are going to be available as a raffle at the Paracon this year, September 27th. You can come and throw in your raffle tickets and get 2 signed copies of those, or a signed copy of each, specifically from him. I think it says like Sweet Dreams and like Happy Hauntings or something like that. Pat Fitzhugh. So yeah, those will be signed and available for raffle at the Paracon this year. So adding to our loot.
Right.
We've already started collecting loot. I've been getting packages in the mail, driving my wife crazy with all the stuff coming in. Where this year's Paracon should be even better.
To go into the loot. So yeah,
those are going into some of the haunted kit and stuff like that. And also I will give him a little shout out. We ended up stopping at a little rock shop there in Paducah. It's kind of like a little metaphysical shop, but they have a lot of like the precious stones and things like that. If you dig on that stuff at all, make your own necklaces and bracelets and herbs and rings and jewelry and all sorts of things like that. If you're interested, if you're in the Paducah area, stop in at the Rock Shop.
I Rock Candy.
I Rock Candy. And check them out. And the gentleman that runs it is extraordinarily knowledgeable, and he will follow you around and let you know everything there is to know. So
yeah, he knows. He's extremely knowledgeable about everything that they had, and really cool guy to talk to. And his wife's super nice too. They were really, really great people.
Yeah.
And Ken said, hasn't Pat been researching the Bell Witch for like 40 years? Yeah, in fact, it might be a little bit longer than that.
Yeah. He actually grew up 10 minutes away from the site. So he literally lived there. He lived in it. He grew up hearing all about it. And I believe he told us that the reason why he got into really researching it in his teen years, I think is when he started in his teen years, was because everyone blamed it on, what was her name?
Kate Batts.
Kate Batts. They blamed it on her, and he was sure, even from the time he was little, that she actually had nothing to do with it. And it was kind of his, like, revenge research for her to try to prove that she was innocent, is how he got started on it. So it was kind of a labor of love.
Yes. His mom got him interested when he was pretty young. And what was so fun about Saturday, being in the crowd, a lady put her hand up to ask a question. She's like, "Hey, I just want to let you know we are descendants of Kate Batts." And he was like, "I'm so glad you're here," and he was very gracious. And he's like, she really got the raw end of that deal. And I'm glad that you're here and that you know that not everybody feels like, you know, she's the bad person,
Hmm.
because so many people, like now in that area, if anything happens, they don't say the Bell Witch did it. They say, oh, old Kate did it, So
Yep.
he was very gracious and really, really made them feel good about it. So very cool.
Well, I look forward to meeting the gentleman.
Oh,
Someday.
he's nice. You'd love him, Mark.
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
If he was just a little bit closer, we would
Oh,
totally
yeah.
have him in for a Paracon. But as it is, he'd have to fly in, and it's just a little bit expensive to be doing all that.
Is he
But
going to be in
hopefully, maybe
Arkansas
one
this year?
day we'll get lucky and he'll be in the
He
area.
is.
So
He, as far as I know, he will be he's almost always at the Arkansas Expo, which is the weekend before Halloween in Little Rock, Arkansas. And
Well,
I think he's planning on being there again this year.
Chris and I are talking about going this year.
Yay!
Our 30th anniversary trip. Our anniversary is in October, 30 years, and it sounds like a great date.
That'd be fun. Ken said, yeah, he's awesome. Oh, are you taking off? Have a good night, Ken.
good night, Ken.
Thanks for stopping by. And yeah, Pat is awesome. I've met him 3 times now, twice at different Arkansas expos, and then this weekend. So yeah, great person.
Awesome. Sounds like you guys had a good time.
We had a
We
blast.
did.
All right.
You know us, and you know music, and we didn't even have the radio on because we just yammered at each other the entire way there and the entire way back.
It's kind of like the show, isn't it?
Pretty much. We did a lot of podcast
Yeah.
planning, and yeah.
We did.
Yep. You guys are always much more organized on your show. My show is just kind of off the cuff, in the weeds. I should have called it "In the Weeds" instead of
That's
"On
a
the
great
Fringe."
name,
I
isn't
didn't
it?
know.
In the weeds.
Yep. In the weeds.
That's funny.
Maybe that should be. Maybe that should be my new. Headline.
In the
So
weeds.
we're going to change that.
Instead of embrace the weird. There you go.
There we
Weeds.
go.
Too funny. That'd be great if you guys made it over. And I would encourage anybody, if you're in the area or close enough to get there, the Arkansas Expo is excellent. They've got some really great speakers. You're going to meet Pat Fitzhugh. Ken Gerhardt is usually there. He's the big fit guy. Robert Swain is there. He's also a big fit guy. I believe Keith Age. He's the rock and roll ghost hunter. He's a producer. Excellent guy. Him and his wife are usually there. Adrian and Tina are there. And there's some other names, and they are escaping me at the moment. But there's a really good lineup of speakers and tons and tons of vendors. And it's in the Fort Smith. It's the not the War Museum. What's it called? Military Museum. And it's the most fascinating building, and it's supposedly haunted too, but it's great. It's just a cool place to be. And, there's a lot of podcasts. We're always there going live with the muck, and usually Shauna, she's on a muck with me. She's there going live on her exploring the paranormal perspective. So great time.
All
Lots of
right.
fun to be had by all.
Yay.
Yay.
Well, like we've said, if we get back into Mothman and John Keel and all this stuff, we could literally go for 2 or 3 episodes.
Honestly.
But I think we're to a good wrap-up point tonight.
Mhm.
If you think, you guys. So I'd like to wish everybody a good evening and tune in next Monday for Phil and I for What If Tomorrow, and on Wednesday night, Border Town Strange. What are you guys going to be talking about on Border Town Strange?
It'll be a week from Wednesday.
A week from Wednesday.
Yep. We are going to be doing part 2 of the story out of Tahlequah of The Agony That Remains
Awesome.
with Jason Roberts.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Robert Jason.
Yeah. We had when we did the first part. It was supposed to just be one, but he started remembering so much information from his time there on the ranch. He was like, wow, I didn't realize I could remember all this stuff. Things just started popping up. So we decided to parlay it into a second part because I don't know about all you at home, but Pam and I were like on the edge of our seats with some of the stuff he was coming up with. So truly interesting stuff. So make sure you catch Bordertown Strange a week from Wednesday, and see the second part. And I think we had decided the next few ones we're going to do. I think we're going to do like a Final Destination style one after that.
Yeah.
Nice. True stories of like crazy deaths. So that'll be weird and yucky, but fun.
It'll be fun.
And then we're going to try to get Pat Fitzhugh in to do an interview and maybe talk a little bit about hauntings in Bell Witch. And then we're going to try to do a big, huge like expose one on Hat Man and all the different ins and outs and theories on that.
Hat Man is fascinating.
It is extremely fascinating. And I just checked, and part 2 on The Agony That Remains with Jason Roberts is March 26th.
Yeah.
Wednesday,
all right.
March 26th.
All right. Awesome.
Woohoo.
All right. Well, with that, folks, everybody have a good night, and we'll see you next time.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.